I've had this conversation with Penny a lot over the last 6 years, and I actually wanted to touch on some examples, if that to sort of situate it a bit better, because I think it's it can be easy to just say this is what it is, this is what it isn't, be careful. And I agree with Penny. I think it's really important when you're doing either to take care of yourselves so that you don't, so it doesn't lead to burnout. And I actually think mobilizing can lead to burnout often, and more ruptures in relationships than organizing. But bear in mind, you'd have, I think organizing, a key tenet of organizing is embodying the world you want to see. So what I think about, so when I think about being anti-capitalist, well, what does that look like in our lives? Or like, redistribution of income or wealth. How do we show up for people beyond our immediate families, which is what we've been taught and told. Last week someone reminded me of the Thatcher quote, "There is no such thing as society." That is what she wanted, and I feel like has to a great extent achieved. But anyway, I'm waffling now, and I wanted to give some examples from all from the UK. And so the first one is an example of a failure. So it was a mass success in terms of mobilizing. So if you take yourselves back to 2017, around the inauguration, is that, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, of Trump back in January, because obviously in the US it's weird, and there's this gap between when, if there's a change in power when it happens. And I think I remember on the night of the Muslim ban, like a bunch of people got together, and then I myself and a couple of friends joined that later to get people to turn up to Downing Street the day after. I remember it was a Monday morning, to protest Trump. I think it might have been the 31st of January, because I remember it was also the day a white supremacist walked into a mosque in Canada and shot to death 6 people. And it was way more successful than we thought, to the point that some of our speakers couldn't get to the front to speak. It was really great. And there were a couple of other big Stop Trump demonstrations, including one in the summer that was around 250,000 people. But there was also the Women's March, which brought 250,000 people to London. But similar to the Black Lives Matter movement, they had people in small, teeny tiny villages in the UK doing women's marches. And as much as there were lots of things that were problematic about it, it got people angry and it got them to show up for things. And I think massive failures of that movement, including because of organizers like myself, who was in a small room after one of the Stop Trump demonstrations, and we were just shouting, arguing with each other. I feel like the December's general election should have been ours, should have been the left's. And I think general elections in a democracy are about choosing which government you want to fight. And after everything in the last 10 years, for Boris to win with a majority, I feel like, how is it that we can get hundreds of thousands of people out onto the street, but then we can't get them to go door knocking, to have those difficult, uncomfortable conversations with their partners, their friends, their families? And that's something that I think is a place for us to reflect on, just like I'm sure in the next few days and weeks that we'll see similar things out of the US. But onto a really positive one now. So the Black Lives Matter movement, as Penny said, came to the UK in 2016, and that same group have been organising and mobilising various ways since then. But this time around in June, with the death of George Floyd, obviously the protest happened internationally. But I wanted to touch on a teeny tiny seaside town on the south coast. So Margate. I don't know if anyone, I'm sure there are people here who know Margate. Margate, couple of years ago, the person who ran for MP, I think, was the UKIP guy, or the guy who was already an MP and then became was a Tory and maybe switched to UKIP. Anyway, Margate had a Black Lives Matter protest, and when I told one of my friends who's a black woman who grew up in Canterbury, she was like, "What?" It was hell for me growing up in those sorts of areas. She was absolutely shocked. And I have a friend who just recently moved to Margate just before lockdown, and so she was there and she was watching this. What then happened in Margate is the organisers of that initial protest then got together and said, we're not going away and we're going to become a group, and they became the People Dem Collective. And I don't know if they existed before then, but what I can see from, they don't have a website yet, but what I can see from their social media channels is that the first thing they did was organise this protest on the beach in response to George Floyd. I think that must be an amazing atmosphere in June, on the beach in June. Anyway, they then got together and decided, what do we want to do? And they crowdfunded money to start a national cultural centre that will be on the seafront in Margate. And it will be a place, an educative place for people to come and learn, but also for organisers to gather, and a space for them to think about what is the change we want to see and how do we get there. And I think that, for me anyway, is a perfect example of organising, because they've got lots of people out there. You know, some people, you could argue that it's a semi-passive action. You're going to go for a walk anyway, and then together the organisers and other people, they said, now we're going to get those people to give us money so we can do this thing, which is a huge thing in my books, because we don't have infrastructure, we don't have spaces where we can go to that are about us. And the final one is, this is an interesting example, but a few years ago, Penny and I, with a few of our other friends, well, our friend basically organised this, but she wanted to bring together Black and brown activists, think about how we can support each other and how we can build strategy together. And so she secured some funding for us to have an away day, a retreat. And so a small group of us came together, and we messaged people that we knew or didn't know and said, is there anyone from your group that can come to this thing? And 35 of us went away to the countryside for a couple of days and spoke about various different things in the world and various different contexts. And after, it was all about, great, you come to this thing, now join us and build this thing. And it was called the People of Global Majority Project, and this is way back in 2016. And that group did go, I actually left that group a little while later, because a lot of my personal priorities had changed. But that group came together and did lots of other bits and pieces, educative pieces. I think it exists as an abstract, and I'm not sure what they're doing now, but I think it's it's a quite a unique one, in which you're trying to get people to come to a thing and then hope they'll join you in your efforts, or at least take something back. I'm going to stop there, but I hope that made sense. But I just wanted to give some examples. Oh, just really quickly, trade unions. If you're not a member of a union, do that at 8 p.m. this evening when this call ends. But I guess mobilising is agreeing your colleagues to go on strike. Some people would argue that's organising, but if it's something that's very critical, tube drivers, for example, it might be train drivers, it might be pretty easy. So you get them to go on strike and come up to a picket, and then you would talk to them about the wider issues and think about what can this person give and how do I get them on board. And as Kwame said in that video, it is about a political ideology almost, maybe that's too strong, but it is about saying this is the world we want to see, this is why, and it is about changing hearts and minds. But that's my view.